Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm John DeLynn. It is May 13th, 2026, and we are here for part 2 of our, I'll say from a Mormon Stories perspective, groundbreaking series on looking into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we are here with a brilliant, entertaining, fascinating, gripping storyteller. We are here with Melissa Duge Spiers. Hey, Melissa.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us.
So excited for part 2. We had so much fun in part 1, so this is going to be good.
Yeah, so if you're just joining us for the first part of this series, you need to know that we already recorded 2.5 hours-ish, part 1, where we did an extensive history of the Seventh-day Adventist movement and hopefully not in too annoying of a way, drew a gazillion parallels between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon movement, and the Seventh-day Adventist movement. And while there are key differences, there are a lot of similarities. I'd say we're more similar than different structurally.
We really found some major, and I think pretty much anyone from any high control background religion, JWs, will probably find a lot of stuff in there that we didn't even cover.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely go back and watch part 1 because we found some fun stuff.
Yeah. And we're not going to be reiterating, number one, all the similarities, and number two, just the extensive doctrine and history and theology and practice of Seventh-day Adventists, because we're going to assume that you watched part 1. So if you haven't seen part 1, pause this, go back and watch part 1, and then you'll really enjoy part 2, because part 2 today, we are going to be focusing now on Melissa's upbringing as a Seventh-day Adventist, but also her loss of faith in and or exit from Seventh-day Adventism, and her incubation as an ex-Adventist, or at least as an ex-Adventist activist, because she incubated for a few decades before she then came out as a public critic of the Seventh-day Adventist movement and published her book, which is a good segue for you to talk about your book.
Good segue. So this is my book. It just came out. You can find it anywhere, Amazon, order it from your local bookstore, etc. Holy Disobedience, Sex, Sin, and Secrets in the Biggest Church No One Knows, that being the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah. And for those who, again, are being obstinate and are going to watch this episode without watching the first, you need to know that while the Seventh-day Adventist movement was founded in the mid-19th century, right around the same time the Mormon Church was ending, 1840s, 1850s, they now boast 25 plus million members worldwide. I think we established last episode that it's like 18 million active self-identifying members worldwide, which actually makes it 4 to 5 times larger than the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because in 2026, I believe the Mormon Church has only like 4 million. Even though they boast 17 million worldwide, I think there's only 4 million active self-identifying Mormons worldwide. But we're way richer than y'all. So.
Way richer and way better known. I mean, everybody knows Mormons. Nobody knows Adventists. So.
Yeah, but y'all are huge, but again, almost unheard of. So it's just it's a fascinating thing. So anyway, now that we have talked about the history and doctrine and theology of your church, we're going to dive into your story, Melissa. Anything you want to say as a disclaimer or as a preface before we dive into your Adventist story?
There you go. Sure. I guess the main disclaimer is probably just a standard memoir disclaimer, is that I tell everything from my perspective. It's my opinion about my life. People who experience the same situations may have had a different experience. I don't mean to speak for anyone other than myself. And that in memoir, names are changed. Things are changed. So that I think is just something for people to keep in mind when I talk about my story.
And we are going to be talking about child sexual abuse and sexual abuse cover-ups, because for all high-demand religions or cults, that's like the one reliable theme.
Yes.
Whether it's Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Catholics,
Sadly,
evangelical Christians.
yes.
That's 2x2s. That's the one thing we all have in common for whatever reason.
So trigger warning to everyone.
Yeah.
Things will get dicey.
All right. Okay. So you said last episode you're a fourth generation Adventist?
I am. So last episode, we talked a little bit about the aggressive missionary stuff of Mormons and Adventists, and that is how my family got brought in 4 generations previous in both my mom's side and my dad's side. Was that, and this used to just be U.S.-based missionary work, obviously, of targeting very poor people who didn't have access to many resources. On my dad's side, it was my great-grandmother who was widowed, and she had 4 children to raise. In the South, she was extremely poor. And the Adventist church there gave her a job in their university laundry system, and they educated her 4 children for free. And it was a great bargain for the Adventist church, good investment, because they've had now 4 generations of quite affluent, loyal Adventists ever since, right?
I would say moderately affluent.
Right, moderately.
And we'll talk
Not
about
Mormon affluent, but moderately.
not Huntsman, Romney,
Right.
Marriott level.
Just Adventist doctor affluent. Yeah, that's a whole other sub-level.
What city state again did they convert?
My great-grandmother on my dad's side was in the deep South. She was in North Carolina.
Okay.
But then they all, and my mom's side was out here. My mom's side actually lived in California. We're not in California, are we? My mom's side lived in California since before it was a state, et cetera. It was my great-grandmother, her father, so I guess my great-great-grandfather, became an Adventist pastor of some sort. My great-grandmother was the first one on that side. They lived in what was called Fort Sutter at the time, which is now Sacramento. But and again, same things, poor people brought in by, hey, education, hey, this and that. And,
so there were public schools at the time, right? So is it just better schools for poor people?
I don't know that. Yeah. I guess public schools were in existence.
But these are parochial schools?
These are parochial schools. I think it was considered better education.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting
there was the promise
hook.
of going on to college, which probably wasn't. You could go on to an Adventist college after Adventist school. And I know on my dad's side, my great-grandmother, she was given a job, I think, first at the church laundry. And so she probably felt loyalty there. So then when they offered to educate her kids, it was probably... I'm not sure.
I'm not going to be doing this all episode, I promise. But I lightly mentioned this, that as the Mormon church has tried to figure out a new identity in the past 5 to 10 years, they've come up with this thing called Pathways, where they're offering a web-based university education to people everywhere, but also internationally.
Yeah.
And it just has to be that they've realized that y'all had it right, that we've known forever in Mormonism that tracting, knocking on doors is annoying and pretty ineffective and inefficient. But education, what a great missionary hook to say, come get a great education.
Yep.
And as you get educated and get absorbed into the culture, it's an amazing hook to make you committed and loyal for the rest of your life.
Totally.
It's brilliant. Y'all had it figured out before we did.
They've been using it for generations, clearly.
Wow.
And it has been a very effective tool. It's interesting. I was talking to someone who was more of a cult scholar type of thing, and he was saying the interesting thing about that, though, is it only works for about 4 generations. And he used the example: you bring in the poor first ground level one, and they are so damn grateful. They are so pro the church. They are the most aggressively, we love this church. And they get their kids educated in the system and more affluent. And those kids still remember when they were poor and it was awful, and they're pretty grateful, and they know that they got the education that maybe their neighbors didn't or whatever. And then the 3rd generation is sitting on top of those other 2, and they've been pretty affluent, and they've got all the education and the healthcare and everything, and they're fine. And they're
becoming prideful.
That's right. They're becoming prideful, and they're just coasting. And then that 4th generation, which would be me, comes along and is like, what the hell is this craziness? Like, get me the hell out. Like, I don't need this. I can live all the good parts without this weird stuff. And there's no gratefulness anymore. Like, the gratefulness has been totally lost by my generation.
Whoa,
it's a very interesting.
I don't know that we've studied that in Mormonism, but the way we frame it is the wealthy and the educated and the rich are prideful, and so they leave the church because they, followed the evilness of the world and secular education and that sort of thing. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of that pressure and guilt in Adventism, too. But I think by sometimes the third generation, but certainly by the fourth generation, nobody sees it as a grateful situation at all because we're so far removed from what brought everybody in the beginning. And it's just like, and truly that's happened in my family. Like very few of my cousins and certainly my sister and I, and none of us are Adventist anymore.
Interesting.
And all the other generations still are.
So great-grandparents were converts through education.
Yes.
Okay. Poor converts through education.
Exactly. And so then my grandparents, both of my grandfathers went to the Loma Linda medical school, became doctors, and then my father and his generation of all my uncles went to Loma Linda Medical School. Also, Loma Linda is the Adventist medical school. And
wait, so on both sides you have grandparents, parents and or grandparents that were doctors educated at this one Adventist medical school?
Yep.
Whoa.
And then all my uncles. And of course, a lot of the Adventist women go to Loma Linda to study nursing. But of course, most of them don't come away with a degree except for a Mrs. degree.
MRS. We call it the MRS degree.
Right, okay. Exactly. Yeah. So that's both of my grandmothers. That's what happened with them. They were technically nursing students. I think they both got their degrees. And I think my mom's mom actually worked for a little while. But yeah, it's a marriage factory for the women, and for the men, obviously. It's
but a doctor and a nurse factory. And I didn't mention that I bet y'all get confused a lot with the Christian Scientists.
Yes.
But you're pro-medicine.
That's it.
You're not
People say that all the time. Yeah. Like, oh, yeah, I know you guys. You're anti-medicine. It's like, oh, no.
Wrong cult.
Wrong cult. We're actually the opposite.
Okay.
So when I was born, my father had not yet gone to medical school. He was a youth pastor in the Adventist church. He had gone to the seminary, which is in Michigan, and I don't remember much about it. I remember a little bit. We moved around a lot. He was stationed in a bunch of different churches, and then when I was about 4 or 5, he quit the ministry. He was not only a youth pastor, but he was a Pathfinder leader. So we were talking about the Pathfinders earlier. So Boy Scout, Girl Scout group of the Adventist church. So, and then he quit abruptly, went to the Loma Linda Medical School, became a doctor. And so all of my life, I really kind of knew my dad mostly as a doctor. And I knew that he'd had this pastoring experience. He still preached a lot. We moved to where the seminary was when I was in high school, which is Berrien Springs, Michigan. And that's where I went to Andrews Academy, which is the Adventist school there. And
really quick, do you know what percentage of med students at Loma Linda Medical School are Adventists?
Most of them.
Okay.
Most of them.
Okay.
But I don't know an actual.
Got it. A lot.
Yeah, okay. A lot.
Okay.
And as you can tell from my family, there's a lot of legacy going on there.
Right. Yeah.
But
so you're in Michigan now?
So, yeah, I was in Michigan. We moved there when I was in 8th grade. And so I went to my full academy experience there. And then shortly after I graduated from academy, I left the church. Like the minute the door of the academy closed on my butt at 18, I was like, I'm done with this church.
Okay, I need to back up then. I don't want to go too far. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up as an Adventist in your home, your parents, the gender roles, how many siblings?
Yes.
How did Adventism manifest in your behavior growing up?
Yes. Because I'm going to get ahead of myself and stuff. So please back me up when okay. So we were raised on the more conservative end of Adventism.
Where was your birth order? Where were you in the birth order?
I have an older sister.
So you're the youngest of two.
So I'm younger. And so I was, 3 years younger than she was. And we were very, very strict Adventists in terms of the dietary rules, the behavioral rules.
Which ones?
We were homeschooled until 4th grade. The mother is supposed to control everything about a child, and so my mother really took that seriously. We were not allowed to have doors that locked ever, even up until high school. Our rooms were
So you wouldn't masturbate? Is that the type of thing?
Well, not masturbate, but also no contraband. So our rooms were regularly ransacked. Again, usually when we were a little older than teeny kids, but for makeup, for jewelry, for novels, magazines. We weren't allowed to listen to pop culture music.
Cassettes or albums or any of that.
No cassettes. We didn't have a way to show movies at that time and we didn't have a TV or a VCR, so that wasn't probably a thing.
No TV or VCR.
But yeah, we were raised entirely without a television. That was considered very bad. And we did have a radio, and we were allowed to listen to a smattering of, my dad had loved the hippie music, and so we did listen to a little bit of that, but that was old by the time I was into music. It wasn't cool. So Joni Mitchell didn't do anything for me. But
like Mamas and the Papas. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
It was funny. There were like Peter, Paul, and Mary was okay. Joni Mitchell was okay-ish.
James
Taylor. Then there was all this Adventist music that was okay. The Kingston Trio. And
were they Adventists?
They, I think, were Adventists, or maybe Adventists just approved of them, possibly.
Okay.
But really no music of any kind. And so we were homeschooled at first. That was miserable because back then homeschooling was not the robust thing that it is now, where there are like homeschooling groups and you have fun assignments and things. It was these dry assignments from like 1950s on like mimeographed sheets and flashcards. And that's basically all we did all day long with my mother, and she'd get really frustrated and we would cry. And but we were particularly controlled with our looks. And that is an Adventist thing, but it was another layer of crazy in our family, where my maternal line was obsessed with, we had to be pretty, skinny. Our hair had to be it had to be long and wavy, which of course I do not have wavy hair. So we had to have perms. She would literally drag me out from underneath the bed crying, and she would hit me with a hairbrush and force me to sit still for these perms so that my hair could be basically frizzy and fried. And so then it would have to be set in rollers every night. And it was this big thing. And that was our Sabbath routine. So Adventists, for those who didn't see the first one, celebrate sundown Friday to sundown Saturday as their holy day. And so it was a very, very strict, I was spanked regularly. And the biggest parts of childhood that I look back on with just horror were the emotion control, the thought control and emotion control. It was a combination, again, of Ellen White, the Adventist prophet, and my mother's particular parenting, that you were not allowed to feel any bad emotions. That is not okay. You're not allowed to express bad emotions or happy, actually. Ellen White didn't like happy either. My mother thought if we got too happy, she would say, "You're being silly. Stop being silly." And but it was really bad. You could never confront anyone. You could never say no. You could never disagree. And Ellen White had a lot of stuff that she said where literally there's a quote where one bad child, what did she say? Because it was more emotional than that, not bad, but one fussy child basically would ruin heaven for everyone there. So nobody could be in heaven if you were a fussy child. And so you were not allowed. ever.
We covenant not to do loud laughter, by the way.
There you go.
Anyway.
There you go.
Had to throw that in. So no, that's weird. No positive, excessively positive or negative emotion.
Yeah.
That's significant. So you're just neutered. You're detached emotionally from yourself.
Exactly.
Which serves the church and the parents, but not necessarily the individual.
Children. Yeah. Absolutely. And
so crying was discouraged.
Crying was very discouraged. In fact, my sister and I have really horrific memories of my mom literally choking children. My sister can remember her doing it to me, and my mom babysat a couple of children, and we remember her doing it to them, where she would literally, if they were crying, put her hand over their mouth until basically they were choked out, till they stopped crying for a minute. And I remember confronting her because I was the child that confronted things, and she said, "Oh, I'm just getting their attention." It was okay to just completely deprive a child of their emotions because emotions were wrong. So that was a big part of the scariness of growing up Adventist. Another scary part was Adventism is an end times cult. So we were raised from infancy to know that we were going to be persecuted and our parents might be killed in front of us, and we were going to be beaten and tortured because we believed in the Sabbath, and we were going to have to run away to the hills and all of this. So the Adventists have this big persecution fetish, and it's very abusive to children because I remember I wet my bed for years having really bad nightmares of the persecution end times when I was going to be chased into the hills and my parents were going to be killed in front of me. And so it was a very, very strict upbringing. And we went to Adventist schools.
Talk about food.
Oh, yes. Okay. So food. Yes. So Adventists have very strict dietary rules, and if you're following them. So we were vegetarian. We were...
As a family?
The whole family. Oh, yeah. Everybody.
Wow.
Yeah. You had to be a strict vegetarian. And then there are all these corollary rules where no caffeine.
Were eggs and cheese okay? Or
we did have eggs and cheese. Okay. Yeah. Ellen White at one point said cheese was bad, but we never followed that one. Again, hypocrisy is layered everywhere you look. And then there were weird things like margarine was okay, but butter was not. I don't know. Very strange.
But eggs and cheese were okay, but mostly vegetarian.
Okay. And then Ellen White had a bunch of rules that were based around preventing sex and masturbation, which we followed very much, which was no spices, no pepper, no mustard, no salsa, nothing.
Ketchup okay?
Ketchup was okay, yeah.
It's more sweet.
Ketchup is more sweet, yeah. I think. And then we were raised pretty much with no sugar also, and that is not an Adventist thing. That was just my parents being...
It's hard to be thin and beautiful if you eat a lot of sugar.
That's true.
I think.
That's true. And we would find my mom hid about bags of candy like under her car seat and behind the freezer and things like that, but we were not allowed to have it. And when we were allowed to go trick-or-treating, she would take the candy away from us as soon as we got in the door, and she would give us one piece per day, but somehow our whole bag would disappear within like a week.
What about like spaghetti straps and halter tops and mini skirts?
So our clothing was extremely tightly controlled as well. We were definitely modesty and just sober dressing in general. Nothing too flashy, nothing too lacy, nothing too bright, I guess, or sequined maybe. But we were not allowed to have tank tops or bikinis. It had to be very modest. Everything had to be modest, no low cut anything. And there were also all kinds of subsidiary rules, like Adventist schools up until I graduated in 1987. Most of them banned jeans, I guess because that was still lightly associated with the hippies, maybe from a decade.
Mormons banned jeans in Utah through the 60s.
Yeah,
definitely. For women, yeah.
Yeah, for men in ours also, and it was all the way through the 80s. But they claimed it was just because we needed to look nice and professional. But I think it was associated with those reckless hippies. And so
no movies, no Hollywood.
No movies, no Hollywood anything. No, we were encouraged not to wear makeup by the school and the religion, but my mother forced us to wear makeup. But it had to be light. So there was a lot of my mom's, and she got this from her mother. And what she would say to us from when we were very young was, your father likes it when you look pretty. And not only did that always strike me as really creepy, but I also knew that it didn't matter. My dad was rarely home. He was working all the time, and he never really looked at us. He was always reading a book or something. I knew that my dad didn't care if I was pretty. But so it struck me as false, but it also just rang creepy. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what was involved then at the time. But apparently my mother's mother had done that to her, along with the skinny and the pretty and everything. So it was a multi-generational thing. And so let me think. When you're deviating
from the norm, like with makeup, how is that justified? I mean, you said that the dad wants you to look pretty, but like disobedience to religious teachings, the extent to which you weren't ultra-Orthodox.
Right.
Did your parents try to justify things theologically or belief-wise?
Dad never weighed in, but mom's was that it was just to make you look presentable. Don't look like an old washerwoman. So if we had gone the other way, if we had done bright lipstick, for instance, or sparkly eyeshadow, that would have been we would have been smacked for that too. So it was just to hit a very fine line, which was a lot of what we walked, being raised as an Adventist kid, which was also very, I think, psychologically damaging because so much was not explained and not codified. It was absorbed and you were expected to know it and expected to know exactly where that line was, but nobody ever actually could tell you. And it would shift. It would shift randomly.
Because obedience is more important than doctrinal consistency.
Submission and obedience was prized above everything. And Ellen White said that multiple times with children. Submission and obedience. You start, mothers was usually what she said, you start making them submit. A child's will is not its own. Yeah. And that was it. And so
Joseph Smith said obedience is the first law of heaven.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So damaging in high control religions. It's really, really bad. So other kids got to go do Pathfinders and have sleepovers and play dates. My sister and I were never allowed to do any of those things.
Well, why not?
Well, we'll get to that later.
I know. Okay, later. That's fine.
I finally understood as an adult. But as a child, it just made me feel like a freak. And I was never included pretty much anymore in anything because I couldn't do anything. And most of my friends had slightly more liberal parents, so they had like a television or something. So it would have been really exciting to get to go to their house for a play date, but we weren't allowed. And so we... trying to think, like school, Adventist school was very controlling also. So they would look the other way for those of us girls who wore makeup with our parents' permission. But again, it had to be really subtle. So if they kept a bottle of fingernail polish in the office, fingernail polish remover in the office in my academy, and you would get sent to the office to remove your fingernail polish if it was anything other than the palest of pink. And some academies, girls were not allowed to have short hair. Boys were not ever allowed to have long hair back then. That was and if you had some kind of dress up thing, boys were never allowed to wear women's clothes. They could never wear a dress. That was absolutely evil and forbidden. We had a lot of sexual control in academy in terms of purity culture. A lot of classes on how to stay pure. Abstinence was the only thing we learned about. And so I like to say we kind of grew older, but we didn't grow up. Like we, particularly in my family, my sister and I, didn't have any formative experiences really and have to navigate much. So I was pretty naive by the time I reached 17, 18. And so the religious side then, so I've talked a lot about the behavioral control stuff, but they say we're all born atheist and then we get indoctrinated. And somehow I always feel like my indoctrination just never quite took. Like they sure tried. But I really, really, as a young kid, wanted to be a gymnast. And we were allowed for some reason. Again, more of the hypocrisy, because my mother had done a little bit of gymnastics in her childhood, I think, and that was why we were allowed. And we belonged to just it was non-Adventist gymnastics team for a couple of years. And I was probably 8 to 10. And once you get up to a certain skill level, you're supposed to compete, right? And I was not allowed to compete on Saturdays. And so that was it. I was a gymnastics has-been by the age of 10. And I had a big beef with God and with the church at that point that I never quite got over. Like, I did not understand people telling me this was a good God. Why was he taking this thing away from me that I loved more than my left leg? Like, why would he do that to me? And also, if the church was the problem and it was because of their stupid Sabbath law that I wasn't allowed to compete, well, then they were on the hook too, and I hated them too. And I kind of never got over it. And I knew I didn't have any control over my life, so I just had to mark time. So I became what I call a performance Adventist. Basically, all through high school, I would say that's what I was. We called Ellen White Egg White because her initials were often abbreviated. They called her E.G. White, and so we called her Egg White. And so I always called the really religious kids egg whites, and I was not an egg white. I was a performance Adventist, and I did all the stuff. I did the prayers. I taught Sabbath school. I was always in whatever skit they wanted done at week of prayer, but I didn't really believe any of it. I was just biding time, I think,
That's pretty remarkable. So in your mind, let's just say you're a teen, fully immersed in the culture with a fully Orthodox family. In your mind, are you consciously a non-believer? Or was it more dormant or
I think
subconscious?
it was more dormant.
That would make sense.
I would have said that I just had fundamental problems with God and with Seventh-day Adventism. But I was almost kind of an agnostic. Like, I just didn't know, but nobody would ever let me see what was out there. So I was just like, well, I don't know what else is out there. I know I can't be Catholic, but other than that, what
it's like Truman Show. You know that something's not right, but you don't even have experience outside to know what outside would be.
Precisely.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
So by the time I was in late high school, so just to describe kind of a day or a week in an Adventist high school student, like our school day started with chapel. So everybody went in and there was like a little sermon-y thing or a prayer. It was only like about 20 minutes or something. We sang a choir song and more prayer. And then you went on with your school day. There was always 1 hour of religion class every single day for your whole 4 years of academy. But it was not religion. We didn't learn anything about anything except Adventism. And then every evening, we had family worship. So you'd had 3 indoctrinization sessions every single day.
Wow.
And then Friday night to Saturday night, you often had 3 services: Vespers, church, 4, I guess, Vespers on Friday night, Sabbath school, church, and then family worship that night. And by, junior year, pretty much, I was just like, what are they all so scared about? Why do they have to keep shoving this shit on us so badly? Like, why are they so scared? What are they hiding from me? And I got and up until then, I had just been a goody two-shoes. Like, I was such a people pleaser that if I was trapped in this system, I was just going to be the best at being in this system. And I was just going to be submissive and obedient. And senior year, I was just like, nope, something smells rotten. And I decided it was the Adventist fixation on sex, and I was going to find out what it was all about. And so I knew I couldn't do that in the Adventist system. And I literally had probably kissed maybe 2 boys a couple of times. That was the extent of my great experience. And
through high school? Through your senior year of high school?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was 17 when I graduated, so I was 17. And I was like, I can't do it here. So I went down to the local public school, and I went to there. I said I was going to Vespers on Friday night, but I was really going to the football games or because I had my driver's license by then, so I was semi-autonomous. And I would go to the football games and the basketball games, and I was hunting. And I found a guy that I thought was absolutely gorgeous, and I thought, well, that's it. So I found out where he worked, and I went in and initiated a conversation, and 2 weeks later, I was without my virginity, and I was so proud of myself. I just thought this was the best thing ever.
What about deep shame from all that sexual shame programming?
Didn't have it. I knew they were lying. I just knew it before I did it. It was like, they are lying. They're afraid I'm going to figure out that it's actually, I don't know, fun? Maybe fun was the whole ban on it. I didn't know, but I was just like, there's all of this, oh, you're the licked cupcake, you're the this and that. Partly because it was only targeted at girls. And so I was just like, that inequality didn't sit well with me, but also because they just clearly didn't want me to find something out, so the fault must be on them, not on me, you know?
Man, I'll just have to say, in the Mormon context, this narrative is almost unheard of.
I think Adventists too.
Even a gay Mormon boy who knows he is attracted to men, he still is marinating in the shame and will take decades to unwind the homonegativity and the self-hatred.
Yeah.
So the fact that you were marinating in the sexual shame culture, but you were impervious to it, it didn't really penetrate your subconscious. Well, you're saying that was even unique for you, for your culture.
It was very unique for Adventist culture. And it did affect me very badly for decades after. So I did not, at that moment, I thought I was free and clear, and it was the best thing I could have done. But we'll get there. And, so
so you lost your virginity.
Yeah. So I just,
did he become
and
a
of course I didn't
boyfriend,
call it lost. I destroyed it. Like I was freaking after,
so you were
just
defiant.
Like I was killing it. I didn't want it. I was pissed at the whole system. And yeah, we dated a little bit, but it really didn't ever become a relationship. But and I think, and he was quite like a little cowed by all of this, you know. And he was like, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And I was like, "Damn straight, you know. Let's do this." And so I thought at that point, like I had beat the system, you know, like. I didn't feel a thing. I, kind of waited. Is part of my soul going to be ripped out of me? Am I going to feel the whole whatever? And I just felt really giddy and pleased with myself. And so I was like, ha, ha, ha. And
this is super sensitive because like we demonize men that are asking details, but I think hopefully it's okay for me to just say it had been demonized and made to look like scary and horrible and bad.
Right.
Do you want to talk about like how it actually was for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
In a way where I swear I'm not being creepy.
No. I mean, there's so much in here about that experience and everything. So you're just asking questions right along with the book. And I talk about it because I'm willing to talk about it. So absolutely no creepy questions. It's all good. It was, I honestly don't remember it that much. I remember, it's funny because I talk about in here where he asked me if it hurt. And I was stumped for a minute and like I was so detached from my body, I didn't even know. I had detached completely. It was this other thing that I had to get done. And that's the part that came back to bite me, was because I never learned to associate love with sex. I never learned to associate any good feelings with sex.
You were doing exposure therapy where you were finding the aversive behavior and then doing it.
There you go.
To like try and reprogram your brain, I think.
Yeah. But I didn't quite get it correct. And
no, that's very different than like learning to have emotional intimacy with somebody.
Exactly.
You're just like, gotta have sex because it's taboo and I want to kill the taboo.
Yep, exactly. That was my thought process.
Okay.
And so I thought I had done it. And then, they had, I always say that they had taken sex away from me before I even got there. You know, it had been so managed and so loaded with all this crap, and it had become this depersonalized thing. So I just kind of put the nail in the coffin by depersonalizing it, just like, there you go. It was depersonalized. You got it. And so from then on for a couple years, from 17 to 20. So then I was done with Adventist school shortly after that experience, and I wanted to go to a non-Adventist school. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll get back to the part of it.
Yeah.
So I was convinced from my freshman year, I wanted to go to an Ivy League college. I was not going to go to an Adventist college. I was never going to go to an Adventist college. And
which is taboo, right?
Which is taboo. We were supposed to go.
Yeah,
Yes, we were absolutely supposed to go. Everyone in my family had always gone. Everybody knew had gone. Nobody
to the one in Michigan or the one in California?
I could have gone to the one in California or the one in Tennessee or Tennessee. Anywhere was okay, but and so the way Adventist schools back then controlled it was that Adventist colleges only accepted the ACT test, American College Test, I guess it's called. And
that was true about BYU too, by the way. Weird. Okay, keep going.
Okay, well maybe this is their way of doing it too, and all what I call normal colleges, whether they were public colleges like University of Michigan or private normal like Barnard, where I ended up going, they took the SAT.
Interesting.
And back then, of course, nothing was online. It had to be proctored in person with the bubbles, fill in the pencil stuff. And SATs were only administered at public schools on Saturdays. So we couldn't even go out of our school system and go sign up at the public school. Because
I never made that connection about why BYU did the ACT and not the SAT.
There you go.
But it would help funnel people, Mormons, into BYU.
Bingo.
I had no idea.
Bingo.
Wow.
I've never heard anyone talk about it other than me, but that is exactly why they did it.
Wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, whenever you take that, I think fall of senior year, two other students and we had a very small class, it's like 65 kids or something. Two other students and I don't know how we found each other because it was such a traumatic experience. We were so afraid of getting caught, or I was so afraid of getting caught. But, and she and he were not in my social groups necessarily, so I don't know how we found each other, but we somehow arranged, I still get goosebumps talking about it. We arranged for a proctor to administer it for us on a Sunday.
The SAT.
The SAT. And I don't know where we did it or what. I remember I missed the word archipelago. That was, otherwise I would have had a perfect SAT score and I was so mad. But so I remember that part, but I don't.
See, that education came through.
I bombed the math, but the verbal I was okay on. But so we had to go around like seriously, and we did have academic counselors, but they wouldn't talk to us about schools that weren't Adventist. Our libraries wouldn't stock, because back then, of course, nothing online. So you had like college catalogs to look at the classes and look at the campuses and all that stuff. They would only stock the Adventist colleges. I had to go to the public library to look at like Harvard or University of Michigan or something.
I just have to say that's a cinematic moment of like these kids acting like they're going to do something really rebellious and terrible. And then you zoom out and you realize that what they're actually doing is secretly preparing for the SAT and getting an SAT proctor instead of like getting an abortion or whatever.
That's
like
it.
That's got to be a Adventist
there you go.
Movie someday.
Well, from your mouth to God's ear, as they say, right? I'm hoping my book will eventually become a movie. So anyone watching that's thinking about that, that's one of your scenes.
Okay. Love it.
But so
catalogs are Adventist.
Yeah. So they basically tried to prevent us from applying to anything that wasn't Adventist.
Secular schools.
So I had only applied to one college. My little hubris there was going strong because I'd only applied to Harvard, and I did not get into Harvard. But I had my Ivy League goal, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I agreed with my parents that I would go to an Adventist college, but I would go to one of the ones in Europe. So I had taken German and Spanish in high school, and so I went to the Adventist school in Austria. after I graduated from Adventist Academy, and I was signed up for a year, but I was partying too hard over there, and so I had to come back early. But so I had heard that the Adventist colleges in Europe were much more loose.
Intercontinental.
And yeah, they were intercontinental. And so I thought, okay, so I'm going to get some polish for my resume. Maybe I can reapply to colleges I want to get into next year. Plus, I'm going to get very far away from my parents and I'm going to practice my German. And so it was a fabulous, fun experience. It was the only like fun Adventist experience I really can point to. I was only there about 6 months, but the English-speaking students, we weren't really in an official program, so we were just there to study German. So we had all these German classes, but we didn't have any pressure to get good grades or anything. And mostly, they were very strict, like anybody else, during a week. So we had Vespers and chapel and blah, blah, blah. And the girls got locked in their dorm at night. The boys did not, at like 9 o'clock at night or something. But during the weekends, we were just allowed to check ourselves out and just go. So we would go all over Europe, just drinking and smoking ourselves silly and just being goofy and having sex and doing whatever we wanted. And so that was my first experience with any of those vices. I learned to drink, I learned to smoke, and thought it was really fun. And so somebody found out because we kept showing up to class drunk, and because we didn't know about being subtle. And because there's that whole thing about, when you deprive people of things for so long, they don't know how to moderate, right? So we did not know how to moderate the alcohol. And so I didn't want to get kicked out because I still had my eye on my Ivy League prize, so I left about halfway through the year. Went home, applied to regular colleges, and ended up at Barnard College, from which I got my Columbia degree, which gave me my little Ivy League badge that I so desperatly had wanted all my life.
So is that New York City?
Yes.
Barnard College in New York City?
Yeah. So Barnard,
that's a feeder into Columbia?
It is the sister college. So the Seven Sisters and the Ivies were, the seven college pairs. And so Barnard is the sister college of Columbia.
Like
and
Wellesley,
you actually get your
basically.
Columbia degree. So I have my fancy Latin degree from Columbia, which I really wanted all my life.
Okay, that's a big deal to go to Ivy League school and to graduate.
From an Adventist school. It really, it's...
or in any, just period. Graduating from Ivy League school is
I think
badass.
It was a lot easier back then, but it was still like a huge, I really had to work hard for it. I did all the grade grubbing all my life to get there. It was my big focus. And I'm not
were your
quite,
parents mad that you went to Columbia?
I think my dad was snobbish enough to think that was a real feather in his cap. So that was okay. My mom, yes. My mom was not pleased at all because where would I find a husband? She didn't want me in New York City. That was scary and heathen. And she actually, after my first year at Barnard, she took me out because she always paid the bills for our school because her parents paid them. And so that was one of my big traumas.
Took you out? What do you mean?
She refused to pay for my junior year at Barnard. And so that was a big power play, which my mom would do occasionally. And so instead of, she said I wasn't being grateful enough for my education, which was absolute bullshit because I was so grateful for it. I was so in love with my experience at Barnard. And what she really wanted was I was supposed to come home for the weekend or for the summer. And I didn't want to come home. I wanted to stay in New York City. My roommate had a great apartment on the Upper East Side, and I was gonna take rocks for jocks or something so that I didn't have to do science during the year. And then I was just going to have fun in New York City. And Mom did not like that. And she said I was being an ungrateful child. And so she stopped.
What city state was she in again at that point?
Michigan still.
Michigan, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
let's see, Michigan or New York City?
Right? I know. When you're 19, 20 years old, gee, I don't know. So my mom pulled this power play, not going to pay for school. You have to come home. And I said, no. And so I disappeared. And I literally ended up being homeless in New York for 6 months-ish.
Oh my gosh, that's scary. And dangerous.
No money to even buy like a subway token sometimes or food. But I did have friends who let me couch surf with them. So I wasn't like living on the street, but I was so poor and so didn't know what I was going to be doing next week.
Oh, that's another cinematic moment. You're punished for going to an Ivy League.
Punished for going to, I know, right?
And homeless because you want to
because I
continue
wanted
in an Ivy
my
League.
education so bad.
That's wild.
Well, this is not the first time my mother had done this, and my father had actually joined her. My older sister, they took her out of college, did the exact same thing, stopped paying, you have to come home.
Where was she?
She was at the Adventist college in California, and they were still in Michigan. They did it to her because she was not skinny enough. So they took her education away because she would not lose weight.
Dang.
So education was used as a weapon because, again, we probably wouldn't need one, right? We were going to get a marriage, get a husband and whatever. So it was used as a weapon to control us, even in college. And so I refused and couch surfed and just did what I could and decided I was going to be an actor. Because what else could I do to make everyone pissed off? Because you can't be Adventist and be an actor. That's just sin and iniquity all over the place.
It's like dancing.
So I ended up moving in with this guy who was about 12 years older than I was, who was the first actor guy I played against because I had nowhere to live. And he and I had this love scene in this movie, and I was like, okay, well, and that set the pattern then for the rest of my life. I went from older man to older man, being basically a submissive wife, but I didn't know that that's what I was doing for decades. My mom,
all was his girlfriends at first, or marriage?
I had two marriages, and then two long-termish relationships. Him being the first, so my mom caved. After she found out I was living in sin and being an actor, I was allowed to go back to Barnard to finish my degree. But by that time, I was living not on campus. I had lost a whole semester of school, and so I just had to check my boxes to make sure I had my graduating credits. And so all the fun and the really interesting, mind-blowing, soul-expanding parts of being on campus and being able to take crazy electives like death in modern fiction and lesbian fiction and shamanism. I couldn't do any of that. I had to just tick. And I was still living with this guy who was 12 years older than I was. So I was just like a housewife, basically going to college.
Were your parents like, you need to go to church, practice the Sabbath when you're at college?
I still can't figure out. My sister and I talk about this all the time. They were so controlling up until we were about 18. And then never again. The education thing, for sure, they were controlling, et cetera. But the religious part completely dropped off. We never got guilted. They have been very emotionally supportive, financially supportive, even though we've made choices that must just make them spin in their beds at night. They've never said a thing. Divorces, whatever, they've always only been supportive. Excuse me. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what that process was, but it's very unusual because basically everybody I know in Adventism who left got some sort of repercussions of their parents disowning them, excommunicating them. They lost their friends. They lost their whatever. So I did not experience any of that.
And your dad was a physician, not a pastor. Is that right?
At that point, yeah. He was still a doctor.
Okay.
He had been a doctor since I was about 5, all the way up through,
So you made it through Columbia.
I made it through. I got my Columbia degree, and
But you stopped attending and practicing
Adventism. Church. Oh, from the minute I left Andrews Academy. Okay. Absolutely. I called myself an atheist. I was done. In fact, even in Barnard, people, I didn't tell too many people the background I came from at all, but if and when I had close enough friends who were I had told a little bit about this weird Bible cult, they were taking stuff like comparative religions, and they'd come to me and be like, okay, I'm studying Christianity. Give me the Cliff's Notes. What's it all about? What's the Bible about? What are the Bible? And I just would blank. It would just be gone. I would just be like, well, Easter, Christ dying. I couldn't remember any of it. I couldn't remember the books of the Bible.
Well, you didn't totally internalize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I guess
part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah. I had held it at arm's length as if I could the whole time I was a child because I really didn't believe it.
So really quickly, it's reported that over half of ex-Mormons almost immediately go to atheism or agnosticism or both, instead of like some sort of more vanilla Protestant mainstream Christianity. So when you say you went straight to atheism and were both high demand religions, do you have any explanation for why you didn't become a Presbyterian or a Methodist or something else?
I think it has to do with the fact that I just never really believed, and the fact that God and I had that beef over gymnastics, and I just had never been able to just resolve the simplest things that I was being told about, like, well, if he's a good God, why does he let kids die of cancer and my cat get run over? And just all kinds of stuff just did not make sense to me. And so it never imprinted somehow.
Totalistic religions tend to kill God and Jesus for their members for some reason. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess so. It's yeah. And I think of the Adventists that I know who left and are now ex-Adventists, I think a lot of them, most of them probably still believe in some version of God and stuff. So I might be an outlier. Again, I think I had a lot of outlier experiences, but for me, it just never clicked. Clicked.
So what did you do after graduation?
So after graduation, I immediately moved on to my next long-term older man relationship. That became my first husband, and that one lasted approximately 10 years. And that was where it really ended up. I was starting to act out the programming that I had been raised with, but I did not realize and wouldn't realize for forever.
How so?
He was an extremely controlling. I was not allowed to have a car. I was not allowed to see my friends. He didn't even like to see my family.
Was he religious?
He was he was raised Catholic.
Okay.
but not,
A white-collar professional kind of guy?
He ended up being. He had been raised in really kind of very scary neighborhoods outside of New York City, but his family was all involved in the mob in various ways and stuff. And but he had educated himself, and when I met him, he was my martial arts instructor, but he very quickly moved on and became quite a tech guy in marketing and all kinds of stuff. So he ended up a white-collar professional, very, very smart guy. He and I are both quite introverts, I guess. So that was kind of, that attracted me at first. Like, we didn't need to socialize or whatever. And then I slowly realized, but I want to at least see my friends and my family. And I couldn't even do that. And it became very quickly a kind of narcissistic control relationship where I was guilted for wanting to see my family. And if we didn't spend every single night together, well, what was I in a relationship for? And, there was all this kind of stuff that would start coming out. And I didn't know what that was. It seemed very much like the God that I was raised to submit to and obey. And
so you fell in that pattern mold, even though you didn't believe in it and rejected it.
Exactly.
As a teen.
Exactly. It was that good girl programming of don't say no, submit, be obedient, please, be pleasing. And that men really are in charge. And so what I did with that and with the sexual piece, because he was also very sexually kind of aggressive, and I wouldn't say violent. That means it wasn't consensual, and it was because I was into it. But it was very. I fetishized it. So if sex was supposed to be bad, if they had told me sex was bad, I was going to be the worst. I was going to be so bad. Look at me go. Look at me how I'm like taking their sex that they said was such a fragile flower and whatever, and I'm just going to make it, as naughty as I can, and I kind of did that with his controllingness too. It was, I thought I was being so subversive, like, oh, I was raised to be a trad wife, basically. Well, look at me. I'm choosing to do it because, ha, 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 I know better. But, and
there's probably a feminist kind of cosmopolitan empowerment piece.
That's it. I thought it was.
Owning your sexuality. And,
yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was. But I was missing out on the actual empowerment of it, you know. But I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And so then I went straight from that marriage to my second husband, which is interesting. You know, it always, to me, they say in abusive relationships, which I think my first abusive relationship was with the church and my family, my mother to an extent. They say in domestic abuse situations, it takes people an average of 7 times to try to escape before they get out. And when I track my own life, it's pretty true. I only got out about after the 7th try. I got out of Adventism and my family, and I got to Barnard, and then I got into the men, and then, you know, I got out of the men with my second husband, and he was not abusive, not controlling. He was my age-ish. We had kids. He was a party guy, and he was a fun guy, and so he didn't really want to be around for the kid part too much, it seemed. And so we kind of grew apart, and we didn't have communication skills. So, you know, that marriage eventually ended, but not for the weird controlling issues. It could have been, I think, if we'd had communication skills and therapy and all the things that probably everyone needs in a marriage, I think it could have been what anyone would call a normal and healthy relationship. But I had no experiences with that in my family, in the church, with my previous men. And so then the minute the familiar came along, I went jumping right back into the awful men. But important thing that happened during my second marriage, and that was, well, it started at the very end of my first marriage. It ended my first marriage along with jumping into the second one, was got a phone call from my dad. He had retired from medicine as soon as we had gone through college since when all those bills were paid. He retired from medicine very early, like when he was 55 or 50 something, which is very early to be retiring. And he went back to being a pastor. He was the lead pastor at a church, and he'd been that for maybe 2 years, 3 years, when I got a call from him, and I was probably 30, maybe 30. And he proceeded to tell me that he was being removed from his new retirement pastor job, because as a youth pastor, when I was a tiny baby, and as a Pathfinder leader, he had inappropriate relationships with young girls.
Oh, wait. So 2 things. So that explains why he went from Pathfinders to medicine? Because he
got removed eventually.
Because he was abusing kids?
Because the church had moved him several times, and he repeated the behavior because predators always do.
But it also explains why he didn't want, that's weird, why he didn't want y'all in Pathfinders?
Well, that was my mother. My mother did not let us in Pathfinders because my mother found out about these things, and I think it just absolutely crushed her, of course.
Wow.
And she was given no support. The church, her mother, everybody told her, just accept this. This is your cross to bear.
Your husband's a child abuser.
Is a child, yeah.
Was he abusing children or teens or both?
Teens, yeah, like young teens, though. The first one was quite young.
Okay.
And,
yep.
And it was, because I've talked to him about it, and he was very angry at the label of pedophile. And his thing was, I don't go around in a van like yanking children off of playgrounds. And I was
They're just 14-year-old girls, right? Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, you're thinking of violent predators. What you were was a groomer. And he made them think he was in love with them, and he wrote them love notes, and he this and that. And he told them that if he wasn't married, that he would run away with them, that kind of thing, So it was this, no, really, we're in love. And other cultures allow this kind of love. It's just here that's not allowed, that kind of groomer stuff.
And 2 things I have to call out. One is that the church didn't excommunicate him. It sounds like they just reassign him and hush, keep it under the rug.
They ordained him after at least 2 things.
That's so Mormon, and it's so Catholic, and it's so mind-blowing.
It is so, all of them. It is so all of them. He was officially ordained because the way it works, and I'm sure in all of them is pretty similar, was after he went to seminary, then he had to serve the kind of underling pastor job for a couple of years before he was actually considered, okay, you're actually pastor material, we'll ordain you. So you spend those 2 years or so working in different churches as usually a youth pastor because you're young, you just graduated, or Pathfinder leader, all that kind of stuff. You get your experience, you get your recommendations from the senior pastors that say, oh yeah, Paul is great. And then you get ordained. And so that's what happened with him. Was he was a youth pastor in at least 2 different places, groomed and preyed on at least 2 different girls, and then they ordained him.
And it just has to be in my mind that so many leaders must have been abusers themselves, because how else could they then be okay with someone younger being an abuser and still becoming a leader? They must have...
Yep. The details of that particular case, and I just found out recently, just in the past few weeks, because of course, once my book came out, I'm hearing from people in my past who know things about my family. And somebody came out of the woodwork recently who said, oh yeah, I knew one of the senior pastors in that situation, and he was groping my mother all the time.
Exactly.
And then there was another pastor that was associated with that situation. I don't even know which of the churches, but when it was found out, and of course, the girls were always blamed. It was those Lolitas were seducing. One of those girls was then sent for kind of therapy to some other pastor, elder, whatever he was. And of course, he abused her because my dad had put a target on her back. She was easy picking, right? I mean, it's just the levels of sick and boys club. I mean, the Epstein Island has nothing on churches. I mean...
Yeah. When I first realized, I'm like, wait, is the Mormon church, like when we had an activist rise up and start calling the church to protect children better, and he was excommunicated. But then I was finding all these pedophiles, who were not only not punished, but were often promoted.
Yep.
I thought in my mind, wait, is it possible that in Mormonism, predators are promoted and victims are punished? Victims of whistleblowers are...
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
And then I thought, but wait, why would anyone ever do that? And then I thought, it's because they're the perpetrators. The leaders are the perpetrators.
Yep.
So of course they're protecting the perpetrators.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. They're all in it together. They're just protecting, they're just watching each other's backs.
Oh my gosh. It's just mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. And just the levels and layers of just, they're not even very secretive about the sweeping under the rug. It's all just kind of sloppy. And Adventist schools sometimes trade a perpetrator around 4 or 5 times. And then they claim, oh, we had no idea. And it's like, oh, other than the 6 people who came forward and said, right? Oh, right. That no idea. I see. Yeah.
But then the other sick thing is that it's like, oh, he's been a predator too many times. He can't be a pastor. Let's make him a medical doctor. Right. Like what? Where he's inspecting people's genitals? What? How does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and they all claim, of course, they had no control. So, of course, the church would say they would have no control over the medical part. Or
but he went to a church, medical school.
I know, right? It's just ridiculous.
He went to Loma Linda, right?
Yep.
So they did have control.
They let him in. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and somebody had to write his recommendation letters, right? I mean,
you can't make this up.
You cannot make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up.
It's so similar.
Yeah. It is. It's ridiculous. And people love to come at me, and I'm sure we'll have in this comment section some people who love to come and say, it was just your father. He was just a bad guy. Don't blame the church. I mean, I get that hundreds of times a day in my social medias, and I get so tired of answering it. It's the church. Let me show you how. But I just go through my father's, and I fill up a bowl of pasta. And I say, okay, here's the number of victims. Here's the number of bosses my dad had at each church. Here's the number of family members who knew in my family and in the victims, here's the number of conference members who had to know to get him ordained, and then I go through this, that, and this, that. And then pretty soon I've got a whole bowl of pasta. And so then I pour it out in front of the camera and say, so is it just one bad predator or is it the church?
And again, that's just one perpetrator.
And that's just one perpetrator.
Right.
Yeah. One perpetrator, and I get a bowl full of pasta. It's ridiculous. But so that happened. And my family didn't deal with it. The family line still was that poor dad had been seduced. Particularly my mother kind of took that line. And my family doesn't really talk about things anyway, of course, so it was not talked about. And everyone just kind of went sailing on. But I did sit my parents down at that time because I'm the kid who confronts things. And I just said, listen, because I found out from my mother that there was more than one victim. Dad only told us about the one victim. Mom, she let slip. She didn't mean to let slip that there was more than one victim. And so I sat him down and I just said, you know what? You guys have been lying to me my whole life. I feel like everything I've ever known is absolute crumbling under my feet. And you have this one chance to tell me if there's anything else that's going to come back and hit me in the head, because I am not dealing, I have lost all belief in you guys and I can't go forward as with you in part of my life. And they just both looked ill and said, no, you know everything. And that was it. Nobody ever talked about it again. Life just sailed on. And
so wait, so let me make sure I'm understanding. So you're an adult now in your second or marriage or third or whatever, and you find out that your dad is retired from medicine and become a pastor again. And that's when you find out about his history of abuse?
Yes. Okay. So that's a very important part of the story. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so it was just supposed to be his retirement job. I never told anybody because I was embarrassed he was a pastor again. I was like, but it was his retirement job and I was 30-something. I didn't really care. And then he had to call us and tell us about this because he was being removed by the Adventist church because the original victim, or at least the first victim we know about, had found out that he was a pastor again and had called the church and the conference and said, he cannot be in a position of power. And so the church and the conference made an agreement with her. And I'm sure my dad was part of that, although he doesn't seem to claim that but anyway, knows much. But the church and the conference definitely made an agreement with her that she wouldn't sue and she wouldn't go public with it in any big news story. Excuse me. If they removed him immediately.
I wonder if she got a chunk of cash too.
No
cash.
Nope. There was no money exchange. She just agreed not to say anything. If he they would remove him,
she can feel like she did something
and
good.
she had gone on to a really fabulous career. She was very, she didn't want to go public with it because she didn't want her name dragged through the mud and all that. Victims just don't, why would they be re-traumatized? So she was just like, remove him. I've done my piece. I've protected other children, do not allow. And so they said, okay. So they had to remove him. So that's when he had to call and tell all of us. And within, I kid you not, less than a month, he was preaching again. He was, there were things on YouTube. He was assistant fill-in pastoring at a big church. And I've confronted him about that too. And I said, you know what? Why did you feel it was okay to go back when that was the terms of the agreement? And that's when he kind of it wasn't his agreement. It was the church and the conference's agreement. I said, okay, so they're going back on their word. Is that better? Are we happy with that? And he said, well, I was never officially employed again. I was never paid by the church or the conference. So that's how they all got around it. So he was just allowed to keep going.
The mental gymnastics. And
again, the kick in the teeth for the victim. So they have just flipped her the middle finger. Yeah, you can ask us. You can say, you can ask for justice. It's just sick. It's so gross. But
I wonder if our church basically controls a law firm with like 200 plus lawyers.
Adventist Risk Management.
That's a group of law firms.
Yes.
So that's it's called Kurt McConkie in the Mormon Church.
Ours is
That's your Kurt McConkie.
Yeah.
And it's a law firm primarily?
It is insurance / law / it depends.
Crisis management.
Crisis management, yeah.
But
Exactly.
lawyers are part of it.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I swear they've got the same playbook. These people, consultants, are talking to each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So after all of that, nobody talked about it again. I was like, okay, well, I've tried my best to confront what I could, and I still don't think anybody's telling me the truth, but whatever.
I have to note, it's interesting that you had stopped believing at 18, had totally left the lifestyle, the practice, and yet you're experiencing belated 10, 20 years later, like a real jolt. We call it a crisis of faith, but the whole destabilization
came then.
Even though you had detached from it for 10 or 20 years. How do you have a way to explain that?
I think it was, I think I was taught so early, so well to not process anything, just stuff it away. And I knew I didn't ever, just even hearing the name of the Adventist church just gave me hives. And so I was just like, I'm done with it. I'm out. Look at me live a secular life. I really thought leaving equaled healing. I did not realize, of course, there was no official concept of deconstruction back then. So, you just left and you didn't know any other ex-Adventists because there was no social media. So I didn't know anybody who'd done what I had done. I was just like, okay, well, I guess this is the way you live life. I just left the church. That was nasty. And I went on,
Yeah, like Scientology has Leah Remini and Mike Rinder and, Jehovah's Witnesses have, Amber Scora or whoever. I guess the Mormon Church has me or other people like the Tanners before me.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a mainstream cult larger than Mormonism not having in any generation a prominent ex-member, activist critic.
Yeah.
It's wild. Like the 2x2s didn't have that before recently. And it's wild that your church, as old and as big as it is, hasn't had that. Now, those books you showed.
Yeah. Oh, I put them away. Yeah.
Those people, those authors weren't public antagonists?
I think social media has been the switch that flipped because those books came out, but the Adventist Church was able to just say, oh, he was ridiculous. He got excommunicated for things and he's just sour grapes. He's just bitter.
Smeared him and defamed him.
They smeared him, defamed him, and nobody who was really Adventist would be caught dead reading that, because it was a physical copy that you had to order and hold and have in your house. Now people can find it out online. Now people can, but there still are not. I started speaking out during COVID, and there were other ex-Adventists online on Instagram and TikTok, but not so much talking about like just the nitty gritty, and certainly not exposing the sexual abuse part. Theirs was mostly how the doctrine was silly or Ellen White was a plagiarist or whatever. But
got it.
So hopefully, I always say that I really hope in like 5 years or less, I am completely forgotten. I just hope that this is the gate that opens where all these ex-Adventists are going to tell their stories. They're the kids that went through conversion therapy. They're the kids who, that are not related to my story at all, that I really hope they see now that it's possible, that you can do it. And, I don't want to be talking about the Adventist Church forever. So I'm really hoping people step up.
This is my 21st year as a podcaster. So
Exactly.
Y'all need an Adventist story podcast, maybe.
And I love the commenters. I'm sure you get them all the time that are like, you're just being mean about the church for likes and comments. And it's like, you really think I'd want to go through all this for like fun, for like shits and giggles? Right.
No, you're a grifter. You're trying to make money.
Right.
Off of
right.
the
Exactly.
Church. Yeah.
Just trying to make money, which we don't make any money, but that's all right. And we just love having nasty people say nasty things all day long. But so
your dad, you find out your dad.
Yes. So where were we?
So you're in your 30s when you find out your dad was an abuser?
So I'm in my 30s. I find that out. I go sailing on because I was in just the very beginning stages of having children, and I just didn't have the bandwidth. My children never slept. I just, I was dealing with a marriage where I didn't really feel like I was very well supported with my party husband, and so I just had my hands full, basically.
Did you have a career during all this time?
I was always a writer. Well, up until I had children, I was a technical writer for high tech. I had been back in New York. I had been a personal assistant / administrative assistant for some hedge funders and big Wall Street people. So I had always worked, always. But then when I had kids, I did not. And I then transitioned to my vintage clothes selling because that was flexible, and writing. So I wrote articles for magazines and stuff. But so when I was having children, I went through the whole, how am I going to educate them? We had been raised that public school was like awful. Like you could never let your child go to public school. And even though, again, my Adventist programming was showing there, I couldn't imagine my child going to public school. So I looked up all the private schools around me, and one of them was an Adventist school. And I started laughing because it was an Adventist school that had, of course, one of the links about it was this horrible sexual abuse case about it. And I was like, oh, of course, there's my dad. There's this, it was called Monterey Bay Academy, and it had a really famous, it even made it to the front page of the Los Angeles Times, the horrible abuse case there. And so I started reading this article, just snickering at how horrible the Adventists are. And I realized that they were interviewing a woman who was talking about a case long ago. And I was like, and they gave her name. And I was reading it, and I can still just feel that stomach drop and that like icy cold feeling. And I was like, she's talking about my dad. And it was literally just a random Google search, and it brought me to her. And I was like,
so it's another victim.
Well, it was the original victim. Yeah, okay. But we'd never been given her name. No one ever mentioned her name. No one ever mentioned any identifying characteristics. And just the way she told her story, I was like, oh my God, that's my dad. And so I looked her up. It gave the city that she lived in and her name. And so I looked her up, and I wrote a letter, and I just said, you might not want to hear from me, and that's okay, but I feel like I've been lied to by my parents forever, and I would just like to hear your side of the story. And she didn't write back for a long time. But I was like, if she talked to a newspaper, she definitely wants to talk to me. So I Googled again, and lo and behold, there were 2 women of her exact name in her exact city. And I had sent one, obviously, to the wrong woman. So there's some random woman out there that has this letter who's like, I don't know, this is the strangest thing I've ever received. But so I wrote to the second one, the second Dr. Z, I call her in my book, and she wrote right back, and she was like, I've always thought I would hear from you, and I'm ready to answer any questions. Okay. She was really open immediately. And she said, I can answer, any details you want. Nothing's off the board, but I just want you to know that I'm okay and I'm here for you. And then she just kind of, we just started this friendship where she wanted to know about me, and she wanted to, of course, everyone's question right off the bat is whether I had been molested. And I was like, no, my sister and I always thought Dad was like this magical creature. He was just a wonderful presence in our lives. Our mom was the evil one, and Dad was just great. And she just, so we developed like a 10-year friendship off and on. Sometimes I felt like I just couldn't handle it. Sometimes she felt she couldn't handle it. And she was always kind of pushing me to look at the Adventist church. Like she was the first one. She was the first one to mention this book, actually. And I don't know if,
read it. Read the title.
On Becoming a Woman, which we all had to read in high school. She did way back before me, and people after me had to read, where it advocated for female genital mutilation, among other horrible purity culture things and controls of sex. And she kept very gently being like, it's not just my story and experience with your dad. You need to look deeper. And I didn't want to do it. And I just dug in. And so I wouldn't talk to her for a while. And in the meantime, in my life, I had left my second husband for an extremely abusive older man who was diagnosed like personality disorders, narcissistic, as along with others, very sexually abusive. And I went back to what I knew, in times of stress, went back to what I knew, and that was it. Like, if I can abuse myself and submit to abuse from others, then I don't have to think, I don't have to feel, I don't have to, it was a non-feeling thing, and I can be, again, I thought I was being subversive and out there, but right around COVID, and I had been in that relationship then for almost 7, 8 years. So
in your 40s by this point?
Yeah. So I was mid 40s at least by COVID, almost 50. And I started just like so many of us. I got online during COVID and I found the deconstruction community, which I'd never heard of in my life.
Is that Adventist or?
No, just anybody who was deprogramming themselves from any religion. And
is that a subreddit, deconstructionist?
There is one, a deconstruction subreddit, but also just the hashtag deconstruction or hashtag ex-Christian. Okay. And then I started looking up hashtag ex-Adventist, and I found some ex-Adventists, and I was just like, and so I was like, I could do that.
Did you stumble on ex-Mormon? Did you see ex-Mormon?
Yes. Okay. Oh, the ex-Mormon. I have some really good now ex-Mormon friends from that whole situation where, we were comparing no coffee, no this, no that, And so I was like, I'm going to start talking about this weird religion that I grew up in. I'm just going to join this community. Hey, why not? Nobody's doing anything. It's COVID. And so I started primarily posting on TikTok and Instagram, just goofy stuff. Like we weren't allowed to swim on Saturdays, but we were allowed to walk. Why was that? Just goofy stuff. And then the more people I met, the more people started telling me about how they were abused in the Adventist church. And I was like, yeah, well, there's that. Yeah. And so the combination of that, the social media side opening up, and Dr. Z kind of always pointing me toward you really need to process how the church affected you, and this increasingly abusive relationship kind of really forced me into almost a breakdown of sorts, where I was just like, I'm done with all of it. I went into therapy. I stopped drinking. I started literally hugging trees and going on multiple walks every day, and just like, I would cry all the time because I never allowed myself to cry. Tried to let myself feel the bad feelings, but I didn't even know how to do it. And I just, I left the man. And it took me a year or two. And all that while I was just talking on the internet I was recording people who wanted to tell me about their abuse in the Adventist church. And I was writing my book. As part of my therapy.
Real quick, do you have a handle, The Glory Hole?
I do.
And it's WHOLE.
Yes.
Explain that. And was that a different book than this? Was that a book too?
This book. Okay. But then my editor very wisely said, you don't want to go forward with that name. First of all, the double entendre was like silly and pointless in terms of like people are not going to go to a bookstore and say, I wanted that book. What was it about? The Glory Hole? Like the name didn't match up with my content. Whereas
was that just silly, or was there actually a connection?
there was meaning to it. So
and I'm not trying to pry.
I love, of course, I'm a writer, so I love plays on words. So of course, a glory hole, people who don't know what that is.
I know what it means in Idaho, but tell us what it means for you.
So it is basically a hole in a wall in generally a men's bathroom, public bathroom, where people can just extend themselves over there and hopefully get an orgasm, right? And
who knows how?
Who knows how?
Could be a sheep, could be a goat.
That's it. Could be a sheep, a goat, man, woman. Yeah. And I, of course, just being a disaster forecaster, I always thought, why would you do that? What if it's someone over there with a like machete?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
What? So to me, a glory hole always seemed a little bit terrifying. And so the whole glory hole was my symbolism for high control religion of any sort, where you're convinced to like hand over this very tender, very part of yourself, your soul, basically, right? You're convinced to expose like this really fragile, defenseless part of yourself. And hopefully you're going to see God, right?
That's powerful.
You're going to be given a transcendent experience. You also could have it hacked off and mutilated and become maimed and dysfunctional for the rest of your life. And I feel like that's what happened to a lot of us with high control religion is we got the bad glory hole experience. Yeah. We got maimed and disfigured for life. And so it was just my own personal private joke. But I always loved it. And but it didn't work well for a book title. But that is how people can still find me. Those are my social media accounts on TikTok and Instagram is The Glory Hole.
With WHOLE.
With the WHOLE.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because now I meet people who have only known me online and they don't really associate my name. They just say, Glory!
Okay. That's better than Glory Hole.
That's not a good thing to shout across a restaurant. True.
So you're known as Glory. That's cool.
But so I went through this entire just kind of breakdown of, and I had just.
And at some point you moved to California from New York, right?
Oh gosh. Oh yeah. I had done that with the first husband. Okay. Yes, I had moved. I had been living in California.
So the first several relationships.
Yes, exactly.
Were
so I had been living in I have been living in California since I was 28, maybe 27, 28. So yeah, I was writing the book just for therapy, just for doing it, and never really intended to publish it. And then I won a writing contest with it, and I got agents, and so then I was like, oh, maybe I should publish it. Just as my social media presence and advocacy grew, and I realized nobody was holding the church to task. It was me, and I was like, well, I can't stop now. I got to keep going. And I started these lists of every abuse case in the Adventist church that people told me about. And when I had free time, I would Google, and I would just sit down and Google Adventist church abuse, Arkansas. And sure enough, at least a few would pop up, and I'd add those to my list. And so I have these huge Word documents. One is just private cases of everything everyone's told me, and that's never to be released publicly. And then there are the publicly adjudicated ones, or ones that at least people were arrested or something was known, or like my father's case, which never went to trial but is public because everyone has admitted that it happened. So that's really what I do online still. And someone last year reached out to me from a big personal injury law firm and said, we are starting a mass tort lawsuit against the Adventist church. Do you want to help us? And I was like, oh, buddy. And so those lists that I was just keeping because I thought I needed to honor people, that somebody needed to keep a list because nobody was caring about all of these Adventist abuse victims. I was able to hand the public one over to this law firm and say, here, I've got 13 pages already of cases that you can refer to, because a mass tort lawsuit is not like a class action. It's kind of individual cases that are all built on this central theme that this organization was horrible. And so the more you prove that there were previous cases, the more you can help this person's individual case and this and that. So my history of the abuse and the hiding and the enabling and the moving of predators was helpful to them. So they that lawsuit opened officially in January, and it goes on. Everybody can join as long as their statute of limitations is not up, and it's a rolling case type of thing. And I'll give you the link so that you can put it in the show notes. It's a law firm called Pintus and Mullins. And so that's my story. That's where I am now just an advocate on fire for exposing the Adventist church in general. I just think people need to know about it. But the abuse within the Adventist church and telling my story.
Yeah. So have you retained a relationship with your parents?
Yes. And people are often...
And sister.
And my sister. My sister and I are very close. She is also not Adventist. She's also having to do her own work still to kind of deprogram from all of it. We have maintained... Our family is kind of an acquaintanceship with our parents. You know, it's not like they really know or ask or care too much, I don't think, about our lives because they're not Adventist lives. So I don't think their interest really extends to the details. And we kind of return that favor. We don't really care about their Adventist lives. So it's a kind of...
don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell. And people who've read the book have told me that they think I'm too easy on my father.
He never got legal consequences. How did he avoid legal repercussions?
The victims did not want to, go through it.
That's normal.
That's very normal, unfortunately. I mean, I respect their decision completely. And, they had gone on with their lives and they had been blamed for so many years. I think that when it originally happened and then probably statute of limitations, I don't know. I haven't really dug into why not. But I do know Dr. Z just wanted to go on with her life. She didn't want to drag through it all the time. And there was a fear that my father would... can we say it on YouTube, would kill himself. That was a consideration when everyone they would tiptoe around it. That's manipulation. Yeah. But I know at least one of the victims said she could not live with that if that happened. So that was one of the reasons she, and the way I tried to explain, or the way I try to deal with people who say I went too easy on my father. Well, first of all, it's a very interesting dynamic that I tried to show very much in the book. It's an interesting thing to be in midlife and realize that your entire picture of your parental structure was upside down. So we grew up, my mom was horrible. She was horrible to us. And now I have a lot of sympathy for her because she had no idea how to protect us from, like, if my dad could do that, anyone could do it. She was given no support. She was given no anything. And so the only thing she knew that was in her control was to control us. So thus we were not allowed to go on sleepovers. We were not allowed to go to sleepaway camps. We were not allowed to join Pathfinders. We were not allowed to anything because she was protecting us. And I mean, she succeeded. She did her job to the best of her ability. Mm-hmm. She protected us. We were not molested. Mm-hmm. And poor thing, I can't imagine what that took out of her. And then my dad, to find out that this guy who I just had this great relationship with, and he had championed my actual education and he had this and that. And then to find out when I was 35 that he was the bad guy. So how to kind of honor the fact that I had a good experience with this person, but they're not a good person, is a really weird dynamic to try to go through. And so I have tried to portray the fact that the best I can do at this point, and I've heard other children of serial killers say this also, is like the binary, it's particularly in religious settings, like I have tried to get away from black and white thinking and I have tried to get away from good and bad. And you can't just mash it all together and make some happy, like you can't take the black and the white and make it gray and it's all happy and bland. There are edges, and there is bad in the good and there's good in the bad. And the religion tried to not allow us to think that, So I am just trying to exist with there's good in the bad and there's bad in the good. And the only thing that I can do in this situation is give respect to Dr. Z and my dad's victims in the way they want it, which they were okay with me telling the story, but they don't want to pursue anything further. So I am respecting that. And I can try to be a megaphone for the systemic problem. And really, the systemic problem is, I talk about individual predators, but the systemic problem is where I'm really trying to go.
Exactly. It's systems. Oh my gosh, I'm relating so much to this. Like, obviously there's people thinking, well, you should have cut your dad off forever.
Right.
Sounds like you haven't done that.
No. I mean, both of my parents are they are very old at this point. My mom has Alzheimer's. My dad's not too far behind. They have health problems, et cetera. So at this point, to cut them off would I don't know that they would probably not process how and why. And so what point would it be? Would I be making a point? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
and if people want to cut off an abusive loved one, whether they were abused by the loved one or not, I wouldn't judge that.
Yeah.
But what I relate to, like I just finished a 41-part series on the life of Joseph Smith.
Oh my God.
And he obviously was a sexual predator.
Yeah.
But why is the church so rich and popular and successful? He also gave people hope and meaning and community,
right,
and did great things. And even the Michael Jackson video is out right now, the movie. He was one of the most successful pop artists of all time that brought so much joy to people. People still love his music, even if they were abused themselves. Yeah. And he was a child abuser. Like, we're faced with this reality of like, what do we do with beloved people who were also abusers?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know that sometimes people on the internet like to say there's one answer. Cut them all out. Cancel them all from everyone's life. They should all die.
Yeah.
But that's not how everyone ends up choosing to interact with these people that have abusive pasts.
Exactly.
Because you could also argue maybe your dad was abused.
Well,
maybe he was part of a systemic abuse that created the abuse in him.
Yeah. I totally believe. I absolutely believe. And my uncle, who is my dad's younger brother, also believes that my dad they were sent off to Adventist boarding schools.
See?
And they were sent off very young. They were 2 or 3 years younger than their class. So my dad was this tiny kid with a bunch of teenage boys in a boarding school. Are you kidding me?
Uh-huh. And that's why I do think the answer is systems, not people.
Systems. Yeah. Yeah.
Or systems over people. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I think, systems. Yeah. And I think, again, and listening to the victims. Yeah. And I think people want to see their version of justice. And, in my dad's case, the victims have said their version of justice is this. I'm respecting that. I'm listening to that, If I had come in on this story at a different time period when they were younger, he was younger, I was younger, whatever, the answers might have been totally different. But at this point, this is the way I can listen to the victims, respect the victims, try to change the system, stand up for more victims, and try to positively make a big impact, a big change. I can hope.
Yeah.
I mean, an actual Adventist organization asked me to speak about this problem last weekend, and that was the first time I've gotten a reach out from anybody within the Adventist system. In 6 years of speaking out, the Adventists have ignored me.
Wait, they invited you to something?
There are two. They call themselves, I think, independent journalism, which is there's Spectrum and there's Adventist Today, and they are not financed by the church. They are Adventist publications, but they're not financed by the church. They're financed by individual donors and advertising or something, I guess. So they maintain, and they do cover abuses within the Adventist church. Both of those do. And kudos to them. Big shout out. And Adventists today actually approached me and said, we do this thing called Sabbath Seminar, and we have speakers come speak, and would you like to come talk about the Adventist abuse case? And I was like, I'm there. You tell me. And so they did. They just gave me the floor. They didn't put brakes on me. They didn't tell me what I could or couldn't say. They didn't tell me, I was expecting them to try to edit me or something. They were wonderful. They just said, come speak. I did my spiel. I guess lectured for about an hour, and then they opened it to questions and answers. And most of the people who had questions and answers were very respectful. A lot of them chimed in and were like, yeah. One guy was a psychologist, and he was like, I've been in this field for 30 years, and I'm just here to say, like, predators are not rehabilitatable. It's not a rehabilitatable thing. They always reoffend. And I was like, thank you for that.
We're having the same conversations over and over again in our culture too.
Yep.
Wow. Well, that must have been really gratifying to be invited in by at least a marginal group, right?
Yeah, at least, And they're definitely the very liberal, very, progressive part of Adventism, but still,
Yeah. They'll be excommunicated soon.
Right. I'm sure they were writing something. I'm sure they got a letter from Adventist Risk Management. You are off the list.
Yeah.
But so we'll see. I really hope they just, of course, supposedly Adventists say they've been making changes, but I haven't seen it yet. They say that since the 2000s, they've been making everyone take training. They haven't been moving predators, but I've talked to dozens of people from the 2000s and more recent where they've moved predators. So I don't, maybe they're
So there's a systemic pattern in the Adventism of protecting predators and relocating them, and they reoffend.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's very spotlightish Catholic Church, Mormon Church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same playbook.
Okay.
Yep.
Doesn't surprise me. I'm sad. Okay. A couple final questions. So, okay, you and I may view this differently, and I actually am quite different than most of the ex-Mormons I think I know, because I had this weird position where I think I see clearly most, if not all, of the harm the church causes.
Yeah.
And I've been doing ex-cult or ex-high demand religion activism long enough to see that plenty of people who leave Mormonism and or high demand religions sometimes end up worse off leaving than when they were in it. Now, again, I'm not saying what's true on average or even the majority, but what I'm sure of is it's not as simple as leave your cult or high demand religion and life is going to be healthy and happy when you leave.
Yeah.
And there are worse things, in my opinion, than being a Mormon. One of those is being desperately sad and lonely and suicidal because you have nothing.
Yeah.
No morality, no spirituality, no community, no meaning, no purpose, no friends. You want to die, addicted, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not in the position, and I think part of this comes from my training as a psychologist, because I do have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology. I got that along the way. And you're taught as a therapist, you don't impose your values on other people.
Right.
You let other people have their journey, and you don't even nudge them as to what the right answer is. You don't even give advice.
Yeah.
You develop in them their own compass and their own values and let them make their own decisions. So all of that to say, in 21 years of doing what I've done, I don't think I've ever told somebody, you need to leave Mormonism. Or I don't even think I've ever had as the goal with Mormon Stories to get people out of Mormonism.
Right.
I just want people to become their healthiest self, whether that's in or out. So having given that huge disclaimer, you may or may not feel differently or have different goals, but I'll just ask you now directly, for that Adventist that's questioning or unhappy, or for that Mormon who's questioning or unhappy, or for that member of some other high demand religion or group where they're questioning or unhappy, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think I would tell people to spend a lot of time trying to figure out where they get their direction from. And is it partly, familial, or is it the church? Is it guilt? And if so, where's the guilt coming from? I know it took me a long time, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out where my autonomy lays down boundaries and where it says, directs me, or am I reacting? And if so, what am I reacting to? Because I think high control religions do give you a set behavior system within which to operate. And if that's true, if that's where your operational system is coming from, is it serving you? I mean, is it really serving you? Or is it just an echo that you're following? And could there be something better? And there might not. There really might not. But I think particularly for women in high control religions, need to spend a lot of time thinking about is this serving me? And is it equal? And is it, I think sometimes reversing occurrences in the church. Well, if a woman did that, would it be seen the same way? And then thinking, well, why not? Well, then am I not valued as much? So, all those little things that you can ask, which don't mean you have to jump, that you don't have to jump anywhere. You can just start asking yourself these questions,
I mean, I can already see the difficulty in even that approach, which I totally agree with. Mm-hmm. And whether you're Mormon or a Mormon woman or another high demand religion or group, like with you and Adventism, you're taught to be disconnected from your feelings.
Yep.
So do you even know what happiness or sadness is? You're so busy. Do you even stop to learn how to feel your feelings? But then also, if you're a Mormon woman, you're taught your job is to serve others. So do you even feel like you're allowed to care about whether you're having joy and whether you're experiencing joy? Because maybe that's not like with Adventists, maybe that's for the next life, not for this life.
Yeah.
And so and then you're taught to never consider as valid any external source, and any thought or feeling that might lead you outside is scary. And then scary emotions are from the devil. Right. So there's so much conditioning that a Mormon woman or a Mormon man or another member of a high demand group or religion, there's so many chains and barriers that would keep that advice from even allowing someone to explore, and it's the right answer. Right.
No, it's totally, and I'm sure that Mormons have a kind of equivalent thing, but Ellen White was very blatant about saying that even doubt is from the devil. Yeah. Questioning is from the devil. That's the devil using you. Your gut feelings are from the devil. Yeah. Don't listen to your, so how in the world are you supposed to?
Mormons are taught to doubt your doubts.
Doubt your doubts. Well, of course, they have like a little catchy phrase for it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the right answer. And it explains why so many people have a hard time waking up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it just assumes that they can care about what's right and feel their feelings. And already it's a non-starter.
It's a non-starter. Absolutely. The feelings thing is really hard. When I had that little episode for 6 months to a year or whatever, where I was trying to be an actor, I was a terrible actor, and I knew that I was a terrible actor. I knew that I appeared wooden on screen, or not wooden, but it just all seemed fake. Like I wasn't actually expressing. And of course, now I realize that because I didn't know how to experience feelings. I knew how to fake them. And usually only happy ones. It was embarrassing to try to cry on screen or something, and I couldn't get there at all. But you don't know how to experience even the most basic emotion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, that's so powerful. And then there's how do you even know there's this idea of a cult personality where you're told what your personality is, and all the authentic parts of your personality are kind of suppressed and hidden. Mm-hmm. So how do you even come to begin to discover who you are and what makes you tick and what lights you up?
Exactly.
Because you have to figure out what's the difference between you and however you were programmed, right?
That's it. Yeah. People say, like, what's your advice to people who are leaving, not just people who are questioning.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question, actually, yeah.
And I always say triage, because there is so much packaged in high control religion. You could live 3 or 4 lifetimes and never get through all of it. So you have to do a really personal triage of what affected, and I have 2 columns of it. What was shoved down your throat the most, that damaged you the most, that you had the most conflict with or whatever, and work on those, the top items. And then what was taken away from you that would give you the most joy or the most fun, or you just want to explore, that might open a side of your personality that wasn't allowed, and then work on those top things. And so for me, in the, what was shoved down your throat and you just were forced into and gave you the most conflict and trauma, for me, it wasn't biblical stuff. I didn't care about the Bible or the doctrine or whatever. For me, it was purity culture. It was all of the behavioral rules, the submission training, the obedience training, the no boundaries, the don't listen to your gut. So I have to work on all of those things. And I don't care if I ever read the Bible or know what the doctrines actually are. That didn't affect me one bit. So, but for other people, they spend a ton of time rereading the Bible, trying to convince themselves of one way or the other before they can feel at peace. And then the other column is the stuff that you were not allowed to have or do or be, that might open up a part of your personality that might not. I have a good friend who is one of the authors with my publisher, Catherine Spiers, who has gone full on, since she left her religion, into improv theater and musical theater, because that was not allowed, and it's allowed her to process and find joy and identify with all of this. And I love that. And, for me, when I first got out, it was all those things that as an 18 or 19-year-old you wanted to do, like drink and and I wanted to act and I wanted to dance, but stuff like gambling, I don't care if I ever gamble. I don't give a shit. So, I'm not going to spend time learning how to play blackjack, which was very forbidden as an Adventist. But for some people, that's just cool as hell, and that's what they want to learn how to do. So you have to choose your top items in both columns, and then you have to work on those, because it's a lifetime just getting through the top items.
I wonder if sometimes, how many ex-Adventists do you think you've interacted with in some way at this point?
Ooh, hundreds, certainly. Hundreds, okay. I would say.
You'll get to the tens of thousands at some point. But, I have noticed, and this is probably cliche, and I don't have data, it's anecdotal, but sometimes I see that, for example, ex-Mormons, that they all are taught not to drink or do drugs or have extramarital sex.
Right.
So when they leave, they don't know how to manage alcohol. They don't know how to manage drugs. They don't, they want to explore alternative sexuality in ways that sometimes can harm marriages or families or themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Can you relate to that stuff?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And there's also, I think, particularly with the drinking, but probably other addictive things as well, for those of us raised in multi-generational high control cults that banned drinking, you don't know if alcoholism runs in your family because nobody was a drinker.
Yeah. That you know of.
that you know of, exactly. And so I am sure now that alcoholism runs in my family, and I've seen enough of it to know. But I wouldn't know that, if so yeah, you have no no brakes put on by gradual experience and seeing it modeled. Like you have no brakes of seeing it modeled where someone had a glass of wine and then stopped.
Yeah.
Because that's the way you were raised. Like the famous example is the French. The French kids learn to start drinking at 12 because everybody has a little glass of wine and then they're done.
Or Italians.
Or Italians, exactly. Yeah. And so we all end up going kind of overboard, I think, probably. And certainly, I've certainly known some ex-Adventists who are drug addicts and alcoholics, and thank goodness it seems to be a minority, but
also they're self-medicating trauma.
They're self-medicating trauma,
defense,
big time,
right? In their defense.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So what have been some of the key pillars of healing for you that you want to call out to maybe recommend for others?
Certainly, I know therapy has been huge with a religious trauma therapist. I have two therapists, actually, a religious trauma therapist and then a family systems therapist who also works with microdosing psilocybin. And so we've done deep dives, and that was incredibly helpful in learning to process my feelings because I wasn't in control. And I never, even in my college drug phase, I never did psychedelics because I didn't want to lose control. And so therapy has been really helpful. And I think I avoided therapy so long, not necessarily because of the religious thing. I didn't even know I needed religious therapy, but I surely could have used it for all of the sexual stuff and the obedience and boundaries and everything that I didn't have any idea I was acting out. Unfortunately, as far as I've seen, people who know, like people you are intimately connected with, like your siblings, your partners, your parents, often throw therapy at you as there's something wrong with you, you need therapy. You should go to therapy. And so, of course, your instinct is to be like, screw you, I don't need therapy, you need therapy. And it just becomes this ridiculous thing, whereas if it were presented in a different way, it might be a really great thing. And so I had to learn myself that I needed to go for myself, not because someone else was telling me I was broken.
That's huge.
And so that's been very helpful in the past 5 years. Of course, physical. I've learned to process feelings through physical stuff too. I'm a big runner, so running has been very healing. I've always been a runner, but it's been very therapeutic since I've figured out that I can process my feelings while running. And then physical stuff like I crochet now. Just the repetitive physical motion often helps with the self-soothing and the processing emotions that are difficult still for me to do. And writing, of course, writing was a marvelous part. And also, I have to say, being alone. And I needed to be alone. I had been in relationships my entire adult life, generally in controlling or power imbalance relationships. Like my second husband, that was not a controlling one, but it was definitely a power imbalance. Like he was out seeing Lady Gaga and I was watching the children. That was not. So being alone has been the best processing and encountering myself and not really having any distractions. Anywhere to hide, I guess. You can't just focus on someone else and help serve them, fall right back into that female thing. So, and then reading, I've been reading, the online communities of people, really that's what kicked it off for me was the deconstruction, the ex-Christian, there's an ex-Adventist Reddit, which has about 10,000 people on it. That was huge, still huge. I check it every day. In fact, I posted there 2 nights ago saying, I'm going on Mormon stories. Anybody have something they really want me to cover? Like, what is it about ex-Adventism?
Had they heard of Mormonism or Mormon stories?
Oh, yes. Yeah. In fact, that's where I got a couple of the, I love Mormon stories. Fun. Yeah, shout out to my Reddit. Love it.
The ex-Mormon Reddit has like 300,000 subscribers. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's the best.
Yeah,
I point lots of people to the Reddit forums. and then TikTok and Instagram, they have limitations, but the hashtags of deconstruction and religious trauma hashtag was another big one that I could go down that forever. Found so many people to follow, religious trauma therapists and things. And so, I think it's a matter of layering your healing because not like one thing doesn't work all the time. So, I still go hug my trees sometimes.
Are you seeing there was just yesterday's The Daily podcast, which is a New York Times daily news podcast.
Yes.
Yesterday's was about how just in the past few years, there's been a pausing of the secularization of younger America. And there's been a bit of a turn for younger America back towards spirituality a little bit, more with young men than young women.
Oh.
But it's done by an ex-Mormon journalist named Lauren Jackson. She's the one that is like the editor of this show. But one of the things she talks about is just how lonely secular ex-religious people are. Are you finding that ex-Adventists are struggling to find community and friendships?
They are, particularly, like you said, the younger ones. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you'd think it would be all of us oldsters who never knew that there was another ex-Adventist except for us, but the younger kids are really having a hard time. And I see them post a lot on Reddit. And it really, breaks my heart because they're struggling with not only just the challenges that are facing all of Gen Z I still have to live at home with my parents because I can't afford this and that. And I've got, $200,000 of school loans for stupid Adventist college that I didn't even want to go to, but my parents forced me. And now I still have to live with my parents, even though I don't want to be Adventist anymore. And, so they've got all those layers and then just the guilt and shame that kind of keeps them, they feel like they don't know how to make friends with non-Adventists, that they don't have the social skills. And it's really sad because I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, no one does. Almost no one does.
Yeah.
I've been doing this 21 years and I don't think I do.
All the empathy, but none of the answers. Yeah. I just...
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. We're just figuring it out. I will say my deepest respect as someone who has been trying to do what you're trying to do for quite some time.
Yeah.
It's not easy. So my deepest respect to you for trying to be to your community what I'm trying to be to mine in some ways. So
it's a lonely path, and here we are.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish, like, it's weird to me that Mormon Stories has a larger Never Mormon audience than Mormon or ex-Mormon audience. But I think it's because I think every tradition needs its own Mormon Stories equivalent. I was going to say to you, like, I would love for your people to have an Adventist Stories podcast.
Yeah.
For people in and out of Adventism to be able to talk about their Adventist experiences. Because I think stories are kind of the most magical way to develop empathy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So maybe we can talk.
I hope. Let's inspire somebody. Come on.
So you don't want to be an Adventist Stories podcast host.
I've got novels I want to write, and I've got all this stuff that. Okay. And I really do feel like at this point I wouldn't want to start. Like it should be someone younger who has a longer trajectory to go, and I'm really hoping. Like I said, I'm really hoping to be obsolete and just. We need to be hearing from the people with the LGBTQ experience, and I want to hear from people who have been in the African American conference. Like, what's that all about? And I really hope that there will be a lot more diverse voices because I only speak to the super white, older, raised in the conservative, cis-het or. Basically het, bisexual audience. So
het-ish.
There you go. And that's just a narrow part of it. And to an extent, of course, I had a lot of privilege with all of those labels, right? And so the people who didn't, I mean, I really hope they start speaking out and are able to add their...
So you're going to you're going to promote your book and then right off into the sunset in your mind. Right off into the ex-Adventist sunset.
I have a memoir too that's in the works with my publisher. It's a few years from so I have to do that as a follow-up.
Wait, how's that different than this? How's that different?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't realize that memoirs could be that you could have multiples. I always thought, well, you only have one life.
Yeah.
Like, how can you write multiple books about the one life?
I don't even know the answer to this question.
But this one covers, the Adventist experience, my dad's story, the leaving, and all of that, and then the next one covers the abuse, the narcissistic control, the submission control, and of course the religious overshadowing gets into it, but it's more about the submitting to men and why that happened and how that ended in a really bad situation and how I got out of that and
nice.
All of that. That one involves a private investigator and all kinds of fun things. So people are going to have to stay tuned.
So this is just your first of a couple books, hopefully.
This is my first of 2 memoirs, and then I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done talking about myself.
All right. Well,
and then a novel. Got my novel all ready to go.
All right. Well, we'll see how successful you are at riding off into the sunset. I do wish your community further growth and health and development because technically the ex-Adventist community should be bigger than the ex-Mormon community. But we got a big head start in blogging and in podcasting and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Mormons were on the forefront. Maybe it's because we were raised to be comfortable with entertainment, whereas y'all weren't.
That's it, of course.
Because I was raised to perform, singing and dancing and speaking, public speaking.
That's it.
Maybe that's it.
That and you didn't have a hex on any kind of entertainment or even technology. Like technology was viewed with
promoted.
suspicion.
My mom was a director of musicals all through my upbringing.
There you go. I think that's the main difference.
Acting, singing, and dancing. Yeah. So okay.
Because I've heard from other ex-Adventists of like, well, the Mormons are way ahead of us in terms of they were able to organize their exes, when we haven't. But that's it. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the Adventist Church's official social media channels, it is so bad. Like they still can't join the media bandwagon or anything yet. They're just so bad at it.
Well, we're just more. The faithful Mormons are just starting to figure it out.
Oh, there you go.
But I don't think it's going to end well. But whatever. I wish them well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's exciting. I look forward to seeing your community grow.
Yes.
And I'm sure your church, your former church, is, if they're smart, they're shaking in their boots. At like what's going to come of your work and of all the people you influence and of all the other, members of the ex-Adventist community. So I'm sure they'll be suing TikTokers and Instagrammers and podcasters soon, just like my church is apparently starting to do. I mean, because we're all following Scientology at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're all just eventual Scientology clones.
God forbid.
Anyway.
Wow. Yeah. I do hope that lots more ex-Adventists come out, the community grows, and it just becomes a big thing. I'm ready to champion whoever's ready to come to the forefront. I'm got my cheerleading ready. Okay.
So final questions. What's something you're watching or reading lately that's bringing you joy?
Ooh.
Or listening to?
Ooh. I read 3 books at a time. I read a novel, a memoir, and sort of like a self-help or a history or something else. So right now, my self-help or history or whatever is The Culting of America by Daniela Mestiniak-Young. She's the the knitting cult lady online.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
She's fabulous. And that's her second book. Her memoir was amazing. And so I'm reading The Culting of America. That's fantastic. The memoir I'm reading is religious trauma, self-help plus memoir. That's Catherine Spearing's 1,000 Tiny Paper Cuts. And she's so funny, and I love her. And then my novel right now, I'm reading Jonathan Franzen's Crossroads. I love his writing style, and he does good multiple characters, which is what I want to do in my novel. So I'm keeping really close eye. But it's also got a religious undertone of like church shenanigans going on there. So I'm enjoying it fully.
Okay. Tell us a hero or two of yours.
Oh my gosh. So right now, I've been thinking so much recently about Anita Hill.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
What was her name? Christine Blasey Ford, the original women who spoke out against our Supreme Court molesters and predators. And how if they had been believed, particularly Anita Hill, because she came first, we might not be in this situation in the United States at all, And then, just Giselle Pellicot and the Epstein, Virginia Giuffre. I've just been thinking about all of them and how no one ever believes the women. No one ever, and even when they speak out, nothing happens. Nothing happens, and the boys' club moves onward. And I just want to give them a shout out because they are brave women, and I know that that's just a cheap word to say to describe the depth of what they go through just existing. But they have been inspiring me lately greatly.
Love it. And then what's lighting you up lately, just other than reading and writing? What's bringing you joy?
I am training for a half marathon in July, which I have not. I used to run ultra marathons and really long distances. I'm slow, but I can run forever. And so I'm getting back into it. So I'm super excited. I'm going to run it in Napa, and which is a wonderful place that I love. And so the training is fun. Just the anticipation of it is fun, and it's a wine tasting marathon or something I've never done, like one where there's like a little party at the end or whatever. And so I'm excited about the social part of it. And what else am I doing that's fun? Well, coming out here was a blast. I can't tell you how fun this whole little trip has been for me. So that made me really happy.
How did you applied to Mormon Stories? How did you?
Yes.
I can't imagine you've watched or listened to a lot. What made you apply?
My editor sent it to me, or my publisher editor, and he said, there's an audition process, but you should try. And I was like, sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, editor. I love it that like never Mormon editors of book companies are recommending ex-cult members to interview with Mormon Stories. That's amazing.
I love it. I was trying to think, I don't know if anybody wants to speak out about him yet, but did you hear about, oh my God, now I'm going to not remember his name. Well, we won't take up our airtime because I know, but I do have a cult guy that I haven't seen anyone do anything on who just got sentenced to life in prison. And I would love to find some victim who wants to talk and hook her up with all of you.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. Well, that's fun. So good luck. Sell your book. And we'll end by how can people follow you and how can people support you?
Awesome. So yeah, I will just show the book again. We've been talking about it the whole time, but it is Holy Disobedience, Sex, Sin, and Secrets in the Biggest Church No One Knows. There is an audio version. I get to read it to you. So if you have the audio version, it's me. And there's an electronic Kindle version. There's the print, obviously. You can order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, get it from your bookstore, all of those things. You can even ask your library to order it, which people forget to do. But if you can't afford it, ask your library. They will get it. And then you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I am The Glory Hole, WHOLE. And then I'm on Substack. And I do different content on all the different things. So you might want to follow one or two instead of just one. Substack as Melissa Duge Spiers. And if you want to support other than buying the book, you can be a paid subscriber on Substack. I don't do a lot with my paid subscribers yet, but I would like to in the future. start to build a whole catalog of stuff that's just for subscribers.
I totally relate. It's so hard to do everything that's required in social media these days, but that's fun. Well, I'll make sure Brooklyn includes links to all those things in the show notes, as well as to your book.
Okay.
I'm so delighted that you applied. I'm even exponentially more delighted to just meet you and get to know you. You're brilliant. You're courageous. You're a force. And I'm grateful that you would bless Mormon Stories in our audience with your story. And we just are going to be cheering you on and wishing you all the best in your journey.
Thank you. Thank you. I have been so excited about this, and we had a great day. Boy, we just used up our time and it flew by, and thank you so much.
It's almost inhumane what I do to people.
Oh, it's marvelous.
6 hours of interview.
Oh, I love it. I love it because then you get really deep and you don't feel like there's a time limit and all of that. So I hope lots of people leave us comments. I hope we have lots of ex-Adventists coming out. And I think everyone who's ever been in a high control religion will probably identify with most of what we were talking about today.
For sure. Well, thanks again. Buy the book. The book is, one more time.
There we go. Holy Disobedience.
All right. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on Mormon Stories.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. And just really quickly, email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. You can apply at mormonstories.org/apply. If you donate to us, thank you. If you don't donate to us and you want to see us continue, mormonstories.org/donate is the way you contribute. We are being sued by the Mormon Church for alleged trademark and copyright violations. We think, my opinion is, it's to silence and bankrupt us. If you want to support us in that, we have a legal fund set up at mormonstories.org/legal. But mostly we just want you to live your best, happy, healthiest life. Please subscribe and like and comment. That helps with the algorithms. But most importantly, pursue your own healing and growth however you can. That's why we do what we do. So thanks for joining us today. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Thanks to Brooklyn and Julia for all they do to help with our production, along with our board and Margie, of course. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.